Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our first, possibly only, maybe not, we may come back, our Bull Ring Open Day. It's fantastic to see you all here. I'm Andy Burnham from the Megalithic portal, as you may or may not know. Our first speaker is Martha Lawrence from Buxton Museum. She is the Assistant Museum Manager, and she is talking about the Bull Ring and some of its closest relations. Now,
well, thank you very much. I'm really pleased to be here. I'm going to start my talk with a caveat. I know you shouldn't normally start a talk with something negative, but as a museum archaeologist, that essentially means I know a little bit about lots and lots of different things. So I'm not a specialist in any particular area. So if, as you're listening to my talk, and I come out with some horrendous error or something that you think, oh, that was, thinking like that, people don't think like that anymore or whatever, perhaps wait till the end, but then do feel free to share, and because I think we've got quite a lot of time for questions, I believe, after my talk. So so I won't feel offended if you say to me, actually, no, that's not right. So that's the caveat over with. Right, so the Peak District, it's got lots of prehistoric circular monuments, such as henges and stone circles. Some of the books I've read said there were around 40. It's debatable as to which ones you count, which ones you don't. So you can see here, oh, it's a little bit out of focus, I think. So once it comes into focus, this is a plan from John Barnett's book on the stone circles of the Peak District. Well, you can see here there are lots and lots of different sites mentioned, and I've circled the two main ones I'm going to talk about today, which are the Bull Ring, which hopefully you know where it is, given you found your way here, and Below, which I'm sure many of you have been to before. That's perhaps the iconic stone circle henge that we talk about, that we think of when we think of the Peak District and prehistoric monuments in the Peak District. And then I'll also mention a couple of others, but those will be the two that I talk about. And those two are what we call henges. And forgive me if I'm telling you what you already know, but obviously I know it's a mixed audience. The henges are usually defined as a circular or subcircular enclosure, so sometimes a sort of egg-shaped or oval, defined by a bank, and then usually there's an internal ditch. Sometimes it's external. I believe at Stonehenge it's an external ditch. But it's usually an internal ditch, and there's usually one or two entrances. And they usually enclose a fairly large area. Smaller circles, where they think perhaps there wouldn't have been enough room for people to have had a big meeting, are often called hengiform enclosures. Some researchers have taken the measure of 25 metres in diameter as the division between what's a henge. So if it's bigger than 25 metres, that's a henge. If it's less than 25 metres, that's a hengiform enclosure. Although again, that's a debatable thing. So if you take this definition, the Bull Ring and Below are the only henges in the Peak District that we know about. So henges were used for ceremonial purposes and as meeting places, and it's difficult to date them precisely, but they were built in the Neolithic to the early Bronze Age period, so that's about 3000 to 2000 BC, or about 5000 to 4000 years ago. To go on to the Bull Ring, this shows you a map of its location. You can see here you've got the A6 running up the middle, and it's just tucked behind the school and the church here in Dove Holes. It's sited on the crest of a slight ridge, so it could have been easily seen from a long way away, but it's hard now to imagine these views that people would have had in prehistoric times, because it's quite hemmed in by the houses and the busy road that's running past, and the quarries as well. It stands at the junction of three valleys, and it may have served as an easily accessible meeting point or trade centre for prehistoric people in the High Peak area. To look at it in a bit more detail, here's a plan of it. It consists of a circular bank and an internal ditch, and it's got the two entrances it has are orientated north and south, and this inner area is it's 53 by 46 metres, so it's well a very large area. The origins of the name Bull Ring are obscure. Some people have suggested it was maybe used for stock control or perhaps bull baiting, but often with these names it's difficult to know where they've come from. One of the big differences between the Bull Ring and Arborough is that the Bull Ring has no standing stones in it, or at least none remaining, because it was first recorded in 1789 by Pilkington, who wrote that all the stones excepting one are removed. So presumably prior to, or certainly in 1789 even, there was still a standing stone. So that indicates that there were stones in the past, but something's happened to them. Local tradition has it that the stones were used as sleepers for the Peak Forest tramway. But I've only read that in one place, so I'm not convinced. Perhaps the henge also used to have dry stone walls running through it, so perhaps the stones were broken up and used for that, or just in general, perhaps for building stone in the past. So from that you can see that the Bull Ring is pretty damaged, and I think that's one of the reasons it's perhaps not as famous as its sister monument Arborough, is because it's sort of suffering a lot perhaps from sort of modern, or not even just modern, 19th century or 18th century interventions. At one point they even grew corn in the western half of it. In the later 19th century, as you can see from this plan here, the northeast quadrant was used for a quarry. And they found a human skeleton during the quarrying, but no details of it were recorded. As I mentioned, there were dry stone walls around and throughout it, and for several years there were annual bonfires held in the Bull Ring. Okay, so it's a difficult monument to study. Certainly a lot of my research for this talk, it's been, the excavation reports have kind of been, we looked but we didn't really find very much kind of reports. In terms of investigations, the first ones were done in 1902 by Micasalt and Ward, but they weren't published and the finds were lost. They reported that they found several flint flakes and several potsherds. Then in 1949, Alcott did some excavations, and I've got some pictures of these here, and he was attempting to find dating evidence. And the only finds at the base of the ditch were bone fragments and an ox molar and some undecorated coarse buffware and pottery. He also found a small rim sherd of pottery, perhaps from a food vessel, and 7 flints, but none were closely datable. So again, the dating, exact dating when the Bull Ring was built exactly remains still something to be investigated. I have... So I've also got some other further pictures. This is obviously looking through the ditch, through the cut through the ditch. I like the chickens, if you can spot them, around the archaeological site. And that's another one. The next major excavations were done in 1984 and 85. But again, they didn't find any features that they could definitely date to the prehistoric period. Perhaps this is because of all the damage that has been done, all the interference over the years, but who knows. And again, they didn't find any features such as post holes or cremations outside the entrance, which is unusual for a henge, but again, possibly they were there in the past but have been destroyed.